Okay, well, good evening. Well, thank you very much, and thank you to Pat for working with us on this. My name is Joe Cortis, and I'm the coordinator of Caritas Leeds, and together with a colleague, Tom Chibo, we led the Criminal Justice Inquiry. And I'm pleased tonight we also have some of the commissioners that actually played a crucial part in this exercise. And I introduce John Suki, Lucy Irvin, and Pat Brown. John Battle may well be joining us. He is, what did he say he was doing? Launching a book at Huntsworth. Yes, we're launching the history of Huntsworth, whatever. Okay, well. Okay, Caritas Leeds was launched in September 2017 as a forum for all charities, agencies, projects, services and groups that are involved in social care in the Diocese of Leeds. And for those who are not familiar with the Diocese of Leeds, it actually covers the whole of West Yorkshire, plus some parts of North Yorkshire. There's a little bit of Lancashire thrown in there as well, Banolswick. Caritas, the word Caritas comes from the Latin word of charity. And our Caritas motto is faith through loving service. Hence, I would suggest that a Catholic is more than just one who believes in the message of the teachings in scriptures and indeed Catholic social teaching. We're also called to be witnesses to the love and mercy of God. So this means that our faith must be actively expressed through loving service and works of charity. So the aims then of Caritas Leeds include the following, which I think are quite pertinent and actually links with all this. Is there to provide a strong and coherent voice on important social issues for the Diocese of Leeds. It identifies and responds to areas of need within the diocese and encourages, promotes and facilitates social action. So way back in November 2018, Caritas Leeds held an open event for clergy and parishioners to consider the needs of different groups in our communities. Being such a democratic institution, we took a vote, and the vote was taken and to identify two priorities to focus our attention. And one of the priorities which secured the most votes was that of prisoners and their families. So that then gave us a challenge of what do we do with this? So a commission was formed with the aim of setting up our criminal justice inquiry, which but that aspect has finished, is an action research project designed to inspire practical action and campaigning by the Catholic Church at all levels to promote positive change. So really we're about positive change, about raising awareness. So the overall aims of the inquiry, the task, were the following. First of all, we wanted to increase our own knowledge and understanding among Catholics of the United Kingdom's criminal justice system, because we strongly believe that, well, if you don't know the system, then you don't know how to help, you don't know how to get involved, and you wouldn't know what the issues and the challenges are. Particularly focusing on people in our diocese who encounter the criminal justice system in whichever shape and whichever form. We are keen to explore and reflect on approaches to restorative justice. We wanted to encourage Catholics to take more action to support people encountering the criminal justice system and address the injustices which they may well be experiencing. And last, make practical recommendations for action and change. So once we agreed the direction of travel, we spent a 12-month period following and we listened to the experiences of prisoners, ex-offenders, their families, victims of crime, people working within the system, and numerous third sector agencies, including PAC. So I remember talking to Chloe and being grilled and interviewed as part of our...
Very much so.
Yes. So you can see the focus of the inquiry was broader than prisoners' experience and their families. Now, in October 2020, we launched a number of outputs from our inquiry. One of the main outputs is this report, which is available on the website, has been circulated quite widely, and with the title of Justice and Mercy. And I think those two are very important. What we're trying to really home in is that the system and all the others around it, all the other things need to follow these two principles of justice and mercy. We've also produced online resources, which amongst other things include a comprehensive directory of local services, opportunities for volunteering, and peer reassured pack is in our directory of services. And details about the criminal justice system. So at the end of that, we set out 4 broad recommendations. The first one is to promote action that raise awareness and inspire more Catholics to work for positive changes in the criminal justice system. Encourage participation of parishes in practical local action. To foster training and capacity building activities to equip both the clergy and the lay people with the skills and confidence to act as champions for justice and mercy, and ensure that the Catholic Church is an effective partner for organisations working within the criminal justice system. I want to specifically home in on this third recommendation because quite a lot of outputs have actually come out of that, and I think this evening's event actually does link with that. And the last recommendation was to support reforms which build a criminal justice system that delivers both justice and mercy. Now, on the table there, I've put some copies of which includes the foreword of the report, and the executive summary and the recommendation, because each of these 4 recommendations has been fleshed out in some other minor suggestions of how to actually achieve them. Now, last October, we held another open meeting with the purpose of updating on progress made in terms of the action taken at the back of these recommendations. And I think 1 or 2 of you were at that event at New Worsley. This event offered us an opportunity to especially expand on how we were addressing recommendation number 3. Now, I'm pleased to say, and I'm sure the commissioners here will agree, that in working towards this recommendation, we have developed a strong partnership with the West Yorkshire Police. Because as a commission, we believe that this partnership resulted in the launch in October last year of a unique and groundbreaking framework aimed at giving our faith communities a better understanding of the pathways to leading to criminal behaviour. I'm sure all of you will agree prevention is better than cure. So the focus of those workshops were about really raising awareness about the different pathways to criminality. So the focus of these workshops, the first one was on early childhood experiences and the impact of these on development and life chances. The second one, we focused on exploitation, how young people and vulnerable adults can be manipulated and coerced into committing crimes, drawn into criminal activity and modern-day slavery, and the severe exploitation of vulnerable people for personal or commercial gain. The third workshop was focused on violence and how can we break cycles of violence and address underlying issues. Now, each of these workshops were led by key people from the West Yorkshire Police, but also included input, each workshop included input on Catholic social teaching. The last workshop focused on call to action, because we can all raise our own awareness, but then nothing actually happens, albeit small action, and perhaps the value of all that can actually be quite questionable. The medium-term goal of, especially from the West Yorkshire Police perspective, is that they wanted to pilot this workshop in the Catholic diocese, and the idea is to use the materials of the workshops, but also to let it sit in with other faith communities. So, for example, when they start working with the Muslim community, obviously they'll be drawing on the teaching from the Quran, etc. So, I'm hoping that soon the edited recordings of these workshops will be on our website. I think the last thing to sort of share with you is that other outputs from this inquiry included strengthening the links between our diocesan schools and the West and North Yorkshire Police Force. We're very keen for that to happen because, of course, that can take 2 areas really. It can act on prevention, but can also ensure that our staff do know what agencies there are to support families, etc., etc. We're hoping to have some one-to-one meetings with some of our local MPs to discuss our recommendations from the report. And campaigning in the area of campaigning, we're particularly keen to promote the Ban the Box initiative. And on that table there's a little leaflet that actually created by us, but based on the information from Ban the Box. Because clearly, as you all know, the PAC people know this very well. Really, somebody gets released from prison, if they actually haven't got a home to go to, they haven't got an employment, they haven't got any links, where are they going to end up? End up back in the prison system. So I feel that tonight's workshop fits in very well with the work which Caritas Leeds have been doing over the last 3.5 years. And that's enough for me. I'll hand over to Teresa to deliver what the workshop is about.
Thank you, Joe. So, yes, I'm Teresa Alessandro. I'm a PACT, and my role is called Catholic Community Engagement Manager. I'm working across England and Wales, encouraging the Catholic community to know more about the work of PACT and what life is like for people affected by the criminal justice system. So PACT stands for Prison Advice and Care Trust. We used to be the Bourne Trust, and way back in 1898 we were the Catholic Prisoners Aid Society. So the organisation works with everybody. It's a big organisation today, it's a big charity, but back then we were formed by 2 Catholic priests whose first person that they helped was a child who was on her own due to family members being in prison. We don't exactly know what happened, but they set up an organisation whose aim was to find a home for this child was the first thing they did, and then to continue supporting prisoners and their families. So supporting families of people affected by the criminal justice system has always been a part of PACT's work. PACT staff working here in the Leeds Diocese, led by Chloe, are going to speak later, so I'm going to leave Chloe to introduce everybody then. Okay. And we're also joined this evening by James from the Welcome Directory, which is another organisation that we work in partnership with from time to time. James is going to tell you about their work later too. But first, let me have a look. We're going to deal with the technology. So, what is life like for families affected by the criminal justice system? So the other thing that's very important for PACT is that we are shaped by people who have lived experience of the criminal justice system. We don't just imagine what that must be like and do what we think is right to help. People who are affected by the criminal justice system are on our board of trustees, they're among our staff, they're among our volunteers, so that what we're doing is informed by people who really know what life is like. So I'm going to show you some clips now from films that we've made with people sharing their experiences. So when we're thinking about supporting families, the first clip is 2 women speaking on a film. The first person speaking is called Paula. She's now on our board of trustees, but previously she was in prison, and she's talking about what life was like for her children at that time. And the second person in the film is someone whose husband was taken to prison very unexpectedly for her. She didn't realise that there was a problem. He was arrested and taken to prison, leaving her on her own with a young family, and she was pregnant at the time. So these are quite difficult stories to hear, and I might just mention at this point then, if there's anybody who feels this is quite uncomfortable for whatever reason, do get a breath of fresh air, that'd be fine. And do make sure if it's all very upsetting that you talk to somebody after the session. I just feel I need to mention that. Okay, so let's see if these clips are going to work for us. Now this one begins with Paula. I'm just going to tell you because you can't quite catch it necessarily. She first says that her children were bullied.
My children suffered, they were bullied, frightened, ashamed, their parents. They and were lonely. Didn't have anybody to talk to, knew that it wasn't a subject you should really bring up in school, were never asked. I remember my daughter who was, my youngest daughter who was, I think she was 10 when I went to prison. She was 9 when I went to prison, and on her 10th birthday, I remember her saying to me, I rang her up and she said to me, Mum, what am I going to say this year at my party? Last year I said you were at work and that you couldn't make it. What am I going to say this year? In the end, she had to tell people, my mum, I don't live with my mum, my mum's left me.
There's so many feelings and emotions that come with it. Not only do you have to come to terms with what that person has done, you feel it's definitely like bereavement without a body. It just feels like, I think you go through that same process, like if someone died and you think like, oh, what if on that day if I would have asked them to come home, or if they didn't go to that place on that day, or I feel like you feel some guilt yourself because what if you would have noticed that something was wrong, or if you would have just asked them to come home rather. I feel like you feel a lot of emotions that you wouldn't, unless you've been through it, you wouldn't really know. At the time when he first went away, it was awful. There was, I had to take my children through different entrance at the school because people were talking about me in the playground. You lose friends. You are going through this hidden battle that the rest of the world just isn't sympathetic to, because they see the person and the crime and where they deserve to be. And like in my case, I completely agree, that's where he deserves to be, but they don't see what the family are going through as well. The bit that was the hardest, and I don't think anyone would really think about it unless you've been through it, but it was the registering of the birth, because you go there on your own. And that was so difficult. That was so difficult. And I just got to a really, really low place, to a point where I didn't think I really wanted to keep going anymore.
Okay, so this part of the evening is what Pope Francis in his book Let Us Dream, I think, says a time to see. So we're just seeing. I'm not trying to frame what people are saying, because this is their experience and I don't want to sort of shape it myself. I've not been in this situation in such a dramatic way, but that's two people speaking about what their experience have actually been. And now we're going to look at a clip. Oh, not that one, this one. Oh, this is, we'll come back to sharing your thoughts. This is Lewis, who is another PACT ambassador. So if Lewis was here, he would tell you that he was in and out of prison himself from the age of 15 to the age of 38. He's somebody who was in care as a young person, which is obviously one of the risk factors. But he's turned his life around. And one of the things he has discovered about himself is that he is a poet, and he produces spoken word poetry. And this is him performing his spoken word poem. And I'm going to just, again, let him speak for himself.
I didn't want to say what I'm thinking, because the truth hurts. Each time I had to start from the beginning till I found out what works. I didn't want to spill the beans because I didn't want to deal with the fallout. I didn't know I had the means, but then I dug deep and I went all out. I was in a place that I didn't want to be, my face in the mirror that I didn't want to see, no trace of the person I dreamed that I could be. Just another case, a waste, a tragedy. I never examined my motives because my actions were a means to an end. Just like I promised to a fool, my best lies were my best friend. Anger, fear and frustration drove me to the gates of hell. The devil welcomed me with open arms. I was on the wrong path and I really couldn't tell. I never considered the consequences of my actions. Why would I? I never had a reason to. No one could ever tell me nothing. You could talk to me until your face was blue. I could have £1,000 in my pocket. I'd steal a £10 shirt. I'd say these companies can afford it. A little freebie won't hurt. Everything I saw was mine for the taking. All I could see is the money I'd be making. Forget about the laws that I'd be breaking. What's mine was mine and yours I'd be taking. I lived my life without boundaries, yet my lack of boundaries constricted me. I'd spit fire and venom at the judge as he sentenced and convicted me. I was immersed in a dark pool of insanity, sedated with pleasures, drugs, sex and vanity, coerced like a mule, the carrot in front of me. I wasn't aware that God had a plan for me. I was travelling through life like an automaton, always asking the question, what's going on? As the days turn to weeks and the weeks they have gone, and the months turn to years and I'm still marching on. And still I go on, being my head off the wall. I haven't done nothing, no nothing at all. I'm up and I'm down as I rise and I fall, and it's back to the start, and I'm back to the wall. Round and around like a merry-go-round, but nothing is merry and my mind isn't sound. My mind is a mess, I'm a mess, I am ruined. But worst of it all, it's all my own doing. The darkness, the madness, the sadness, the pain, over and over and over again. I'm reaching, I'm screeching, beseeching the Lord. You live by the knife and you die by the sword. The darkest of hours comes before the light of the dawn. I crouched and I cowered in the eye of the storm. I saw myself truly for what I'd become. It came to me clearly what needed to be done. I found the courage inside and the strength in my heart, that a journey begins with a step from the start. All it takes is a step and the rest they will follow. The truest of truths is the hardest to swallow. Yet I found that as soon as I became willing, a life waited for me that was warm and fulfilling. But still there was work to be done. The journey had started but only begun. I finally saw I was on the right path, with the Lord God above, with his rod and his staff. I humbled myself and I sank to my knees, begged the Lord for his mercy. Do with me as you please. I prayed for my purpose, and my purpose it came, to conquer my demons and conquer my pain. Slowly I found the strength I was strong to find a new me to become and belong. So now I'm here and I stand in the light. My passion is fierce and I'm fighting the fight. My conviction is strong and I'm filled with his spirit. I found a new life and with love I will live it.
So, what I suggest now is just take a moment with the people that you're sitting with to just, first of all, introduce yourselves if you don't know each other. I think lots of people do know each other, but if you don't, and then just make some sort of response to those films, the two women speaking and Lewis, just to share what's in your thoughts just straight off. Take a moment to do that, okay? I went to one of the seminars Joe was talking about earlier in the year, and I was very impressed with the weaving in of Catholic social teaching during the course of the seminar. So we're going to talk about Catholic social teaching a little bit now. And obviously some people in the room are obviously geniuses already on Catholic social teaching. So, but what I'm bringing you is something very up to the minute, because we were very lucky at PACT to have Professor Anna Rowlands providing a lecture for us earlier in the year, the Sir Harold Wood Memorial Lecture, and she spoke about human dignity in relation to the criminal justice system, and she's a professor of Catholic social thought at Durham University. So I'm now going to give you some of Anna's thoughts, Professor Anna Rowlands, but obviously they're my interpretation of what I was hearing from Anna, so I think it'd be interesting to see what other people think. So I think for this bit, wait, I can do this. This one. There we go. So for this bit, I think if you want to chip in while I'm explaining to you what I got from Anna's talk, that would be great. So Anna talked about particularly dignity, and she talked about this being threefold. So when I was at primary school, I learned that we're all made in the image of God, and this gives us dignity, okay? And I've known that my whole life. And Anna unpacked this for us and talked about three elements of this idea of our dignity being made in the image of God. So the first thing she said was, as best I remember it, I don't think there's anyone there, our dignity is, there's an element of it that is relational. It's about how we're related to each other. So I'm made in the image of God, but actually everybody is, all human beings are, there isn't anybody that isn't. And so we are all in relationship with each other because of that. So family relationships, yeah, but also just all people. And what that made me think of when Anna was trying to explain that to us, she was explaining it to us very well. Years and years ago when I was at university, in Birmingham, I met somebody in the street who had come from another country, and we were just talking, and I can't remember where he came from, but he said that he'd found it really hard being in Birmingham because he said where he came from, if you passed somebody in the street, you'd say hello because there's like another person there. And in Birmingham, he was finding people just walk past each other. Some of it, I think, is to do with being in a more built-up area compared with the rural area, but there was something that he just found was very different here from what he was used to, that we would actually completely ignore other human beings as we go around, go about our lives. And I think Pope Francis has captured for us that we're all connected in the whole of creation from his Laudato Si work, but also during the pandemic particularly, we've all been more aware of how connected we are and how much we rely on our relationships. So, sorry, I'm hearing a voice that's distracting me. Just see if it's... I'm going to stop worrying about that now. So, Anna Rowland said, there's something about dignity which is about our relationship with each other, which is relational. And the second thing she said, to unpack, is that our dignity is entrusted to the community. That there's something about our dignity which depends on the community supporting the dignity of each other. You know, that actually, if people ostracise someone, let's say, if they humiliate somebody, then they're not carrying that person's dignity. They're not holding it in the community. So there's something where our dignity, although it's innate and that we have our own dignity because we're made in the image of God, actually there's something where the community is entrusted with our dignity. We're entrusted with each other's dignity. And one of the things she said about that was very meaningful was that there are some times when we need to carry in trust for someone their dignity. We need to carry someone's dignity in trust for them until they're able to take it up again. And I really thought about that in relation to what Lewis was saying there in his poem, and that's really why I showed that clip this evening, where he said, at one point you could talk to him till you're blue in the face, he's not listening, he's spitting fire and venom at the judge. At that time, the community, I think, needs to carry that person's dignity and trust for them until they can take it up again. It's not for us to other that person and believe that they are evil and all those things that you might read in the press about people affected by the criminal justice system. Actually, we need to carry that person's dignity and trust for them until they can take it up again, which he was able to. He's turned his life around and he's made a fresh start. And so he just needed us to carry his dignity and trust for him until he could take it up again. That's what I think Anna was getting at with that one. And then the third element, I knew I'd forget the third one and I wrote it down. Yes, that there is dignity, there's something about dignity which is in motion. So she was drawing on the work of Vincent Lloyd, who is a black theologian involved in the civil rights struggle. And he talks about dignity in the struggle. So she said there's something about dignity which is about us working towards making the world a better place, making the criminal justice system work better. There's something about us making the world a better place, something about the struggle to do that, which is another element of our dignity. In doing that for each other, in making the world a better place for each other, there is some sort of dignity attached to that too, the dignity in motion. And she mentioned Anna herself on that evening. Lewis was there in person and performed his poetry, and she said there's dignity in the way he, in the words that he's saying, but also in the way he is performing the poem. There is dignity in the movement, in the performance. Okay, so those are the elements that she unpicked for us, and I just thought it'd be interesting to think about whether any of that connects with the film for people this evening. So anything, does anyone feel brave enough to chip in something now about what you were just talking about together, what you saw in the film, the two women, their experiences, Lewis's experience captured in his poetry, that sort of resonates with this idea that dignity is about our relationship with each other, about carrying people's dignity and trust for them, and about dignity in the struggle to make the world a better place. Those are hard questions, aren't they?
Well, I think both of the women were let down really by the community and society just abandoning their relationships. So,
Yes.
you know, they weren't, the community around, whether it was the school or the young mum's friends or whatever, they weren't carrying them, they weren't helping them to maintain their dignity. You know,
Yes.
even though they're, well, one had been in prison. You know, I can see it really. It is about supporting, you know, each other and families. I think, you know, the whole family
Yes.
context
Thank you.
needs support. Yes.
Thank you, Lucy.
That comes down to that. I think.
Yes.
Dignity.
Good. Thank you. And I think when Chloe's talking, mute Chloe, when Chloe's talking later, at PACT we're very conscious of families' experiences and how we can support families through these very difficult times, and I think that will perhaps come out. Anything else anyone would like to say? Anything coming to you?
Is there something about imagining yourself in that situation? Because to hear those women, you know, you just think, if that had been me, how would I feel? What can't people ever imagine what it's like if it's you?
Yes, yes. Yes, something I've heard a lot since I've been at PACT is, you know, there, but for the grace of God,
Yeah.
you know, anybody can be in that situation. Thank you, Pat.
I was quite struck with the observation you've made that the concept of dignity is our responsibility. It needs to be realized through relationships, through action. And it's quite an obvious thing, but it's very similar to the concept of rights and responsibilities.
Yeah.
You can't have, you can shout about, you know, I have the right to do this, and the other, but then it becomes somebody else's responsibility to realize those rights. And I think it's something similar there, that yes, we accept it as an important concept, but it's a responsibility of others to ensure that the dignity is actually maintained.
Yes.
And perhaps a lot of people miss that point, and that my worst enemy is also being made in the image of God. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Deacon Joe. Yes. I am going to move us along because it's only an evening thing here. We could work on our PhD, but I'm not going to talk about solidarity and subsidiarity very much because I feel that this broader understanding of dignity begins to overlap with those. Actually, you can see where if you're carrying people's dignity and trust, there is something that's connected with solidarity there, for example. But just the last point: everyone can be redeemed, whatever they may have done. Of course, that is something we believe very strongly. That's a strong value coming through at PACT. And I just wanted to capture there's something Pope Francis said once, and I've not been able to find it since, but I know he said it. He was on an aeroplane, when he does one of those ad hoc interviews with the journalists, and somebody was challenging him because he had spent time in whatever country he was in. He had spent time with people on the margins and brought them into the centre, and they were saying, well, I don't know why you're doing that, you're those people. And he said, and they said it was a bit radical. And he said, this is not radical, this is the gospel. And I just thought, yes, this is not radical. Everyone can be redeemed. This is the gospel. Everyone can be redeemed, whatever they may have done. So, we've done that. So, I was going to show this slide at the beginning of the presentation, but I think it makes more sense now. So this is just a very standard slide from PACT. This is who we are at PACT. This is what our vision of the kingdom is. We believe in the value and dignity of every human being. We're all made in the image of God. A strong family relationship is the golden thread. So as Chloe may speak about in a minute, Lord Farmer's report really drew out that family relationships, supporting, nurturing family relationships where appropriate, makes a really big difference to people being able to turn their lives around and make that fresh start when they leave prison. And that's another good reason why we support family relationships. And also, just to say, people making a fresh start makes the whole community safer. So the more we do to help people make a fresh start, the more we reduce crime and reduce victims, therefore. Supporting families makes safer communities. So I just think once we've unpacked dignity a bit more and heard from people with lived experience, then those messages don't sound quite as trite as they might if I had just put that up at the beginning. That's why I thought I'll put that up now and just say, this is who we are at PACT. And our values come from, the values of Catholic social teaching come from our roots, although they are now, the way we work is we work with everybody. Okay, now, on that happy note, I'm going to hand over to Chloe and Wayne and the other members of the team to talk about PACT services.
Hi everyone, so my name is Chloe Duxbury. I am the Deputy Head of Service Delivery and Development for the North, East Midlands and the East of England. It's pretty much everywhere apart from London. This is my colleague Wayne, and Wayne is our Programme Manager for the North. So we have worked in West Yorkshire for some time. Actually, myself and Wayne have worked in West Yorkshire since the very beginning of having contracts in West Yorkshire in 2016. So, and I think we work quite well together, don't we, Wayne? At times.
We're the best.
We are the best. If anyone asks with Impact, we are the best. We are the best region. So thank you, Joe, for today. It was kind of your workshops that inspired me to get in contact to say, let's do something on families. Sometimes families become kind of the hidden victims when it comes to people going in prison, and it is very much people concentrate on accommodation on release. They talk about benefits, they talk about how to get people out of debt, talk about drugs and alcohol, substance misuse, but what they don't sometimes talk about is families and children, and that seems to go amiss. And when you speak to those people that we work with, the concentration on what they want from support is around their families, and it is around either access to the children or building that relationship back with the children, and that seems to be what is most important to them. So we are currently working in West Yorkshire and Humberside on a contract with the probation service. So you might have known over the years, 2015, the probation service was split into two. It went into the private sector for 75% of the cases that they had, and 25% stayed with the government. So that was kind of a probation reform. Over time, the government decided actually that didn't work very well, so they put probation back together. So as part of that, probation have created a new model, which is a unified model, and is now the National Probation Service again. And as part of that, they have subcontracted different prime providers, third sector organisations to deliver some of those elements of what people need on release. Thankfully, because of Lord Farmer's report and understanding that families are of great importance in someone's resettlement, there has been a big emphasis in custody and the community on families, which has been absolutely fantastic for PACT, because it feels that our work that we've done over the years is now taken seriously. And at times it was very much, we felt with some of the prisons, we were like the Care Bears. We did the nice stuff with the children, we did the play activities, etc. Where now they can see it that we are actually a resettlement tool. There's a lot of rehabilitation that we do in custody with families, that we do in the community with families. So it is great that Lord Farmer's report has been widely used, and we feel as though families are now at the forefront of that rehabilitation and that resettlement back into the community. So, in terms of PACT, just to give you a bit of a general overview of what we do, we start with the journey at the very beginning. So this isn't nationally, but different pockets of areas that we are in, we have different support networks. So we've got pre-custody support, so we work in courts and we support families in courts after sentencing. So that might be helping a family understand what's just happened in terms of the sentence that that person's just been given, understanding where has that person gone. If they've gone to custody, how do they get in contact with that person? How do they go and visit? It is kind of those questions that come streaming in, and it can be quite overwhelming at times for families. So what we do is we signpost them to our helpline. So we've got Prisoners Family Helpline, which is available every day of the week, and families can phone, professionals can phone. There's sometimes where I've needed information about another prison, and I've actually phoned PAC's helpline just to ask them what are the visiting times for this particular prison. You can ask them absolutely anything, whether it relates to property, visiting, or just what is available in that particular prison. If they don't have the answer straight away, they'll always come back to that family member just to let them know the answer. In custody, so we've got custodial services nationally, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we're in 67 prisons currently, maybe?
It is a lot.
Yeah. And within those we've got a range of group work, casework, visitor support services. So you may have been into one of our visit centres before, and we've also got our CFO free programme, which is helping people in custody to get back into work, to get thinking about resettlement, thinking about the future, what their kind of attitudes towards the future, and goal setting. And a lot of that is around mindset and their own well-being. In the community, we've got activity hubs. So activity hubs it's quite new. They came into play last year, but they're a really good resource for people that come out of prison into the community, because they don't just do lots of practical activities such as getting accommodation, finance, etc. There's also drama, there's sport, there's arts and crafts. There's lots of holistic support that people can get involved in, and they are very, very popular. So for example, I have got an activity hub in Durham, and we're working with Durham Castle to restore one of their gardens. So that has been a really interesting project. We've currently got 7 of our participants on the garden, and we're doing a little time lapse. So we're filming them every day as they're going in to do the garden. And you can see the progression over time. This garden you couldn't actually see, it was that built up. And what they're hoping to do is to turn it into vegetables, fruits, herbs, etc. And then they're going to supply those ingredients to the local cafe. So that is a really nice little project that we're doing. And again, it's really good for the mental health. They're talking to each other, talking about the families. We're working with them to re-establish their relationships in the community. So that has been a really nice project for PACT. We've got our befriending service, which is a remote service, so we can contact people in the community, check up on them, ensure that they're all right. They can offload, we can assist them in signposting them to other organisations. We've got a community family support, which myself and Wayne will talk to you about today. Again, the Prisoners Family Helpline, our personal wellbeing contracts, and then we have got some grant-funded services as well. So some of those services work directly with children. So we've got some children in need funding, which has been fantastic. So locally here we've got HMP Nottingham that has got some children in need funding, and it has enabled us to have some extra play workers to be able to put activities on for the children when they're coming to visit. And we've also been very lucky pre-COVID, since COVID, of getting some pots of money to support individuals and families. So for example, when COVID first happened and people were pulled out of schools, there was a lot of children that didn't have access to IT, didn't have access to smartphones, so we were able to use that money that we were given via a very kind funder to be able to provide those children with laptops. We provided school uniforms, we've provided carpets for families that have not that have visits from social services and they've not had adequate accommodation. We've provided washing machines. We had a guy who got made redundant during COVID. He was a tiler. He wanted to go self-employed but didn't have the funds for tools. So we were able to use that money to fund some tools, and he was able to set up his own self-employed company. So we've been able to do some really, really good stuff even during COVID, which was really, really nice. So this is West Yorkshire, as you probably all know. I stole this map from someone on the internet, on Google. But in the orange areas is where we are currently working on our personal wellbeing contracts. So these are with the probation service. We are commissioned by a company called Ingeus. They are a global company. And we are currently providing family interventions in the community with males. So they are the current areas that we are working in. So we've got West Yorkshire and we are also in Humberside as well, so quite a large area. So Wayne has got a lot of coverage, haven't you, across those two areas. So we work with those males in the community. We work from community offices, so we don't currently work from probation offices, and we deliver interventions one-to-one in groups. So today I just wanted to show you a little bit about some of the interventions that we're delivering. So we deliver them face to face. They're very much needs led. So we haven't created these out of thin air. We've spoke to families, we've spoke to children, we've took feedback from other organisations that we work with and said, what do you think would be useful for the people that we're working with? And it's not just necessarily the topics, but some of the activities have been created by those people within the service user forums, within the family forums, in the prison, etc. The booklets that we use encourage reflective practice. So I think it's really important for when we are talking to people about communication within the relationships, or if we're talking to people about confidence within themselves, that they can take those booklets away with them. They can reflect back, they can look back and say, that is why I answered it that way. This is what Chloe said to me when we were talking about confidence and how I can use little steps to become more confident within myself, and what goals am I setting myself, and what habits am I going to change within my own life to ensure that in the future I feel more confident with going to the shop, I feel more confident going through those school gates, whatever that person's goals might be. So we have small groups of participants, so to try and encourage that engagement. We don't want to put people by mass. It's very much quality over quantity when it comes to working with our service users. They are delivered by experienced trained staff. We've got 2 staff in the room in the back, and we are very confident in our staff and what they deliver. We also give our service users certificates as well. I think it's good to present people with an achievement and say, you have hit this goal, we've done this intervention together and you've come out the other end, and here's a certificate. This is you to prove, and you should be really proud of yourself for achieving this. We also give them the booklet, so again it encourages that reflective practice. A lot of our service users, we deliver it to them and then they go on to deliver it to their partners, because they want to explore that communication. Well, I know now that I communicate this way, what is the way that you communicate, and how can we work together in that particular relationship? So these are some of the one-to-one interventions that we've got. So we've got Being Home, and that's for people that have just been released and returning back to their family. And that's just thinking about, you're not going to walk through the door with banners and balloons and welcome home parties, etc. Sometimes it's not like that. Sometimes actually that child's quite reluctant to being your best friend again, because you've been away for a while, and actually he's been sneaking in mum's bed at 2 a.m. every morning, and he's not going to be able to do that anymore. So it's just thinking about their attitudes and understanding that it might not be all hugs and kisses at the very beginning, and you need to build that trust back with your children and back with your partner. Communication. So we all know, anyone that's in a relationship, we all have bad communication skills. We sometimes have good ones as well, and it's about how can we improve those, because you'll find with any test in relationship, a lot of it comes down to bad communication. Confidence and assertiveness, so exploring how we feel with ourselves and how to understand our own strengths and weaknesses. And I think some of our service users find this really hard. They come out of prison and their self-esteem's very, very low. If they are applying for jobs and they're getting rejected from them jobs, then that self-esteem becomes lower and lower. So it's about understanding what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, and how can we help to build that self-esteem and confidence. Dads reconnected, so this is for dads who have little or no contact currently with the children, and I suppose dealing with those emotions behind it. Family finance, so this is the basics of handling finances centred around children. So again, if that particular partner has been receiving benefits while that person's been in prison, that might change now that the person from prison is back in the family home. So how is that going to affect their current finances, and what might they need to put in place for goals in the future? It's also quite interesting what you find with some of our service users when they come out of prison. It's very much, oh, I'm going to treat him, I'm going to take him to Disneyland, I'm going to buy him an Xbox, and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And sometimes you've got to say, let's just hold back for a minute. Let's have a look at everything else that's going on. The rise of heating bills. Everyone's going to be freezing for the next 12 months because no one dares put the heating on. Let's have a look at some other priorities. Maybe we can find you some activities in the community that are free currently, so you don't need to be spending lots of money on Xboxes. Moving on, so it's coping with change and barriers that could be caused in relationships. So again, it might be that actually your partner doesn't want to be in that relationship with you anymore, and how can you cope with that change? My family matters. So we know from lots of different research that our service users haven't necessarily had great role models within their own lives. So we look at those role models, what the current support networks are, and how to communicate with those people. New beginnings, so that again is impacts on prison, on relationships, and then we look at parenting. So we can't parent teens the same way we parent a 2-year-old, so obviously we've got 2 separate booklets to cover all ages. So I will hand you over to Wayne, who's going to give you a couple of case studies of what we've been doing over the last 12 months in West Yorkshire.
Hi there, so this is a case study that's quite new. It's in West Yorkshire. I've just changed his name just so as to protect his identity. So here we go. So John was referred to our service in order to complete the good communication booklet. He worked full time and requested a late appointment, so a 6 p.m. appointment was agreed. Unfortunately, John failed to attend this appointment and the next appointment that was arranged for him. I spoke to John's probation officer and asked if we could collectively work with John and arrange another appointment. Finally, another appointment was agreed for 7 p.m, giving John plenty of time to settle after his working day. When I spoke with John at our first appointment, John asked if the call could be quick, as he didn't want to spend hours on the phone. Knowing the intervention could take up to 2 hours, I spent time getting to know John and outlining the benefits of the intervention. Over 2 hours later, John thoroughly engaged, stating, "I did not expect to get this much out of today. I really enjoyed it." John asked if it was possible to complete any further work, and I explained about referring him to our service. I would make contact with the probation officer to make this happen. So that's just one of the examples of the good work that is produced every day from the staff within West Yorkshire and Humberside. And just going on to that, I've got a couple or a few here which are good quotes, which are the kind of the quotes after the interventions happened where we get good feedback from the clients. Now this first one follows on from the case study. "Hi, just a quick message to say thank you. I appreciate the help, and it always helps how easy you are to talk to. I feel really good after that, and I feel like it will benefit so much by working with you in the future. So thank you again. You're good at what you do." The next one is, and then from on there, so it's just saying that the person got a referral from probation, and the person got re-referred back into the service from that because he wanted extra work and he wanted to re-engage back into the programme. So next good message is, "Always find you really easy to talk to. I feel like I'm not being judged for my past mistakes. You make me feel positive about my future." And finally, "Thank you for listening to me today and talking through the booklet. It has given me motivation for change within my life." Thank you.
And I think if anyone has professionally worked with offenders either in custody or community, it's one of those things when you go into a classroom for a teacher, there's lots of pictures on the wall that kids have had, lots of thank you cards, etc, etc, etc. And sometimes in this role those thank yous don't come as often as we would like. So we are really grateful when we get any feedback from our service users, because I'm not saying they come 10 a penny, but sometimes you don't feel the same appreciation because there's a lot going on for them and they are very overwhelmed. So it is lovely when you do get a big thank you. And I did say to her, we've got a big intervention team with Impact, and I said, you're going to have to create some more interventions because we've not got enough. The service users are doing them all and then they want more. So we're going to have to come up with some more ideas. Because we're going to end up with a service with everyone wants more stuff that we haven't got because they've completed everything. We're going to end up running out of certificates, aren't we, Wayne? Yeah. So has anyone got any questions?
Any of the people that you've helped, do they come back and help in the service itself?
Yeah, so with our current contract in West Yorkshire with Indius, we have a peer mentor scheme. So the service users actually can refer themselves in, and probation can refer service users in to become a peer mentor. So that would be where they would take people out in the community to appointments, they'd advocate for that person, they'd support them emotionally just by maybe meeting for a cup of tea once a week, etc. So we do have that peer mentor scheme where people can refer themselves in to help, and it is quite popular at times. Some people absolutely are ready for that and some people aren't necessarily ready, so we work with that person to support them to get to the point where they are ready to become a peer mentor. We currently don't have any kind of volunteer opportunities in our region, which is a shame, because previously when we worked with the CRCs we had a large number of volunteers in West Yorkshire, but we are hoping that fingers crossed, some new contracts are going to come in where we are going to need some volunteers. I think so that would be really useful.
Oh, John.
You alright? Come and take a seat.
Sorry, I'm so late.
No, you're fine, don't worry. So yeah, because we want to get not just peer mentors in, but we want local community members as well. We want people in the community working with people in the community, and we want it to be kind of a community-led project. So that is what we are working towards. Unfortunately, it's just one of those things. I think the criminal justice system over maybe the last 5 or 6 years has been so shook up with the probation service being privatised. Lots of stuff have gone on with the prisons. COVID obviously has been a big shake-up, and we're just seeing the back end of that now. So hopefully there's going to be a lot more opportunities to get the community involved in what we are doing.
I'd like to introduce James from the Welcome Directory. Maybe you'll ask James if people have heard of the Welcome Directory yet.
But we will in a few minutes.
Indeed.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Thank you for taking the time to come out this evening. I know some of you will have long days. I've had a long day. Oh, thank you. It's been a very varied day. I hope I don't get confused. So first thing this morning I was doing some recording for online teaching for the charismatic church that I'm part of. This afternoon I was involved in a Methodist webinar, and this evening I'm here with some Catholics. So if I start speaking in tongues, singing a Wesley hymn or saying the rosary, then I apologise, I'm not quite sure where I am. But it's great to be here. Thank you again for just turning out after a long day. I'll explain what the Welcome Directory is in a moment, but just to start with some statistics. We'll love statistics, don't we? I should say this, let me just backtrack a little because you just reminded me. I'm also a chaplain in HMP Hull as well as working for the Welcome Directory, so just a bit more context for me. So some statistics. Each year there's about 53,000 people who are released from prison, not including remand prisoners who were released without sentencing. So about 53,000. It's difficult to get proper numbers, but the general feeling is that in the prison population, about 20% of prisoners connect regularly with chaplaincy on the inside. So about 8,000 of the 53,000 that get released have made meaningful contact with faith services inside prison. And then, again, it's difficult to get numbers exactly, but we reckon about 1,600 make a transition into faith communities once they've left. 53,000 releases, 8,000 of them having had meaningful contact with chaplaincy, but only 1,600 then integrating into churches, we are multi-faith, mosques, gurdwaras, synagogues and so on. That means 6,400 prisoners each year are walking through the prison gate and are not continuing with their faith. Now, okay, it's easy to make statistics say what you want to say, because there's all sorts of reasons why people do engage with chaplaincy on the inside. Okay, so it's not as straightforward as it appears, and there's all sorts of complex reasons why they don't make that transition. But one of the big things that come out from our conversations, why don't they join a church? Why is it that Catholic prisoners come to Mass every week in the prison chapel and yet just don't bother when they get out? Again, a whole load of reasons, but one of the common themes is the theme of fear. If I just turn up at that church on that Sunday morning and I tell them, or they find out that I've been on the inside, how are they going to treat me? What's going to be on their faces? What are they going to think about me? I actually heard a story just last week at a conference that I was part of, where a chaplain had encouraged a prisoner to attend a certain church when they were released, and they promised to do so. And a week later, as often happens, the same prisoner's back inside and saying hello on a reception visit. And the question that the chaplain asked was, what happened? Did you get to church? And he said, well, I turned up on Sunday morning and I sat in the graveyard, it was that side of church, and I watched all the people go in, and the people just freaked me out. I couldn't bring myself to cross over the threshold and into that environment because of fear. As a welcome directory, what we want to try and do is something that reduces the fear level so that people who leave prison have confidence to step over the threshold into a church, a synagogue, a mosque, wherever. And how we do that is a two-pronged approach. I'll take them in reverse order so it will sort of make sense to you a little bit. What we ultimately produce is our welcome directory. Self-explanatory, isn't it? Okay, welcome directory, we produce a welcome directory. And in here is details of faith communities, names, contact details, times of services. For faith communities that have said, yes, we will explicitly welcome people who've been in prison. In other words, if you've been in prison, you do not need to be afraid about coming to our church. Every chaplaincy team has one of these in their office. Every regional probation office has one of these. It's also available online, so anybody can access it. And what that immediately does, so if I flip into chaplaincy mode for a minute, when somebody's due to be released from prison, then one of us has to go and see them, normally a week or a couple of weeks before they get out. And part of the conversation, certainly if they've had contact with us, is how are you going to take your faith forward? And if they say, actually, I do want to find a church, then we can toggle off back to the office, pick up our welcome directory, and find, what have I come back here? Spurgeon Baptist Church in Milton Keynes. Well, that sounds an interesting place, doesn't it? So somebody from Milton Keynes who lands himself in Hull and is a Baptist, I immediately can go back and say, well, Bletchley Baptist Church actually says they will welcome you. Why don't you give them a shot on a Sunday morning? And so, again, it just gives the confidence, and chaplains can provide that information. But getting your name in a directory and the name of your church in a directory, all very well and good, but dare I say this, there's a lot of well-meaning people, Christians even, People say, yeah, we're welcome. And they really ain't got a clue. So the other side of our work is that we very much want to support and, I'm not going to use the word training, but equip, raise awareness within faith communities about the needs of people who've been in prison, so that the faith community has confidence to say, actually, you've been in prison, but we can confidently welcome you, we can confidently support you. And we have a number of resources to help with that. We have a prison awareness course, it's a 3-session course run on Zoom. All details of these are on our website, so I encourage you to check it out. And at the back there's like an introductory welcome information sheet and postcard. Pick one up so you've got a follow through. But we've got the prison awareness course, 3 sessions. We run quarterly Zoom forums where people from faith communities come share best practice. Again, we bring somebody in from an outside organisation. We'll probably have Pact at some point to share about your work. As organisations that can support churches in their ministry to people who've been in prison. We also have this, we're getting some printed, but you can get it downloaded on PDF. I wrote this. Oh, thank you. Okay. This is a guide to welcoming prison leavers into your faith community. It's a bullet point. And where this comes from is really that there's a load of stuff out there, I think, for faith communities and churches. There's particularly one organisation that's produced something like this, and it's about 250 pages A4. I think, come on, all we need to do is be welcoming, integrate people. So it's bullet points. It's not a whole load of things that you need to go through. It's just like, these are things we need to think about. So I'd encourage you to download that if you're interested in welcoming people who've been in prison. I know time's going on, but let me just share 2 stories. Because when we get this right, the potential is huge. Two guys I know who've been in prison, they're actually both called David Taylor, so surprise, surprise, but that's just the way it's worked out. David Taylor, who's just he's not retired, he's coming to retirement, so he's in his mid-60s now. He was in Hull prison 35 years ago. He was in, like you admit it now, he was a drug dealer, but they caught him on tax evasion, so that's what he was actually in prison for. They just couldn't get him on the other charges. And he spent time inside. In my Christian language, I say he came to know the Lord, he made declaration of faith, whatever phrase you want to put to that. And he came out and he joined actually the church that I'm now part of 30 years ago, who brought them under his wing, supported him, welcomed him, challenged him at times about his behaviour, nurtured him in his faith. And 15 years after that, David Taylor became a missionary to Colombia. His ministry now heads a school of 2,000 children, a feeding programme that covers pretty much a whole city, as well as a load of other social action stuff in Colombia. He would agree with me, I'm sure, without putting words in his mouth, that if it wasn't for a faith community taking him in, welcoming him, regardless of his drug use and his violence, domestic violence that he was involved in, if faith community hadn't done that, then thousands of children wouldn't have got education or be fed. Now I've shared that story because it shows potential, but let's be real, that's really at the extreme. We do not expect every person who's been in prison to go on to be a missionary and that level of work. But the other David Taylor, I love David Taylor's story. He was in prison in Wales, never mind, somebody asked you I suppose, okay, but he was in prison in Wales, again for drug offences, came out, well, he made some sort of declaration of faith inside, came out, life was still a mess. But another church took him under the wing, nurtured him. And David Taylor has not done anything grand in ministry or church or stuff like that. But David's really settled now with a wife, 2 children, runs a barbering business, contributing into his church as a volunteer. See, it's not about the grand stuff sometimes, it's about every life just taking a transition from chaos into order. And my heart, and the heart of the Welcome Directory is, hey, come on church, can we support those transitions maybe a little bit more? I'm going to leave those thoughts with you. I mean, we will have opportunity for questions. I would really encourage you to think about registering. I will say. Sorry.
Good.
One more minute.
Fine.
You sure? Trying to sound charismatic, I can go on forever if I need to.
Maybe not forever then.
Yeah, thank you. 1 minute. To register, there are 4 requirements. Again, because it's not just hands up, we'll put you in the directory. There has to be some quality stuff going on with it. So number 1, the senior leader of the faith community needs to approve. So in your context, if you're Catholic, that would mean the priest needs to approve. It should go without saying, but we have had churches sneak on without the local vicar knowing, creates all sorts of problems. But yeah. Number 2, safeguarding policy. I haven't spoken about safeguarding, but it is a really important thing. You need to have a policy with a name safeguarding. Again, as Catholic churches, if that's where you are, you should have that in place anyway. So the 2 foregone conclusions. Number 3 is a local person, we call them a champion, who will wave the flag of this type of ministry, be a point of contact for us. So somebody, we don't expect a lot of them, just to receive news from us and just remind the church sometime, you know, hey, we do welcome people who've been in prison. And number 4 is some awareness of the needs of people who've been in prison. That can either be through practical experience, if you've got people in your church who volunteered in prison or works as a chaplain, great. If you haven't, again, our 3-session prison awareness course will bring you up to speed and raise awareness of those needs. So I'm throwing that out there. I'd love your churches to say, yeah, we welcome people who've been in prison. I'd love your churches to register. It's totally free. We want to support you in you helping, welcome, integrating and supporting the transition of people who've been in prison. So do pick up one of the information sheets, one of the postcards on the back before you leave, and get in touch if you have any more questions. Okay? Thank you.
Like I say, we're on the time to choose bit now, choosing how you might help. It just made me think, James, just to affirm what you were saying, in January, I was really fortunate to be in Wormwood Scrubs with Cardinal Nichols, who wanted to visit prisoners and listen to them as part of the synodal process. And so we were there in this really big chapel at Wormwood Scrubs, it turns out, and Cardinal Nichols was there sitting with the men, listening to whatever they wanted to tell him. And the really key thing they said was, when I leave prison, will I be welcome in a parish? That is what they wanted to know. And that was the thing Cardinal Nichols said that he would be taking away from that meeting. So I'm just saying, that is one of the things. I leave it with you. So, us at PACT, we've got some ideas too for how you can help in your community. Just to say, Prisoner Sunday, 9th of October, it's always the second Sunday of October. Please mark Prisoner Sunday in your parish diary. Please talk to your priest about making sure that's there. We are working hard. We produce resources every year. We're working hard this year to try and make Prisoner Sunday better than ever. What's really important to us is that prisoners are mentioned at Mass, that there's awareness that people who've been in prison and their families are not them, not out there, but part of our communities. They're part of us. And so that's the most important thing. We do ask for a second collection to support the work of PACT on that one Sunday every year. And some dioceses are marvellous at marking Prisoner Sunday and some dioceses are not. I leave that with you. But what you can do is speak to your priest and make sure that's just marked. We're also doing some work this year in PACT to talk to bishops and see if there could be a special Mass in the cathedral on Prisoner Sunday to kind of set the scene for the whole diocese that the bishop thinks this is important too, and we're thinking about prisoners in the cathedral and in all the parishes. So just so that you know, we're working on that too. We've introduced this new role of PACT Parish Representative. This is a bit like what James was saying, we need somebody in the parish who can just be aware of who PACT is. If somebody wanted to be a parish representative, we've got the little role description over there, you could just take that with you and have a look at what's required. We hope it's not onerous. We'll provide some material for you, we'll email you, we'll invite you to a Zoom from time to time to chat with other parish reps. All we need you to do is just for you and your priest to be aware that that's the role you're doing. A bit like James was saying with the welcome directory, don't sneak it in. And that when we send Fresh Start, our magazine, out to parishes 3 times a year, and maybe it's opened, maybe it isn't. If there's a parish representative, you could just say to the priest that this is when Fresh Start's coming, give it to me, I'll take it into the porch, I'll pin it up on the notice board, just to be somebody who advocates for PACs, just in a small way in your parish. So that role description is over there if you'd like to take that. And you can receive our Fresh Start magazine also. Some of you may do that already. It goes out to all parishes, but as I say, I'm not sure how far it gets in some parishes, but you can sign up to receive that also, either on paper, we're very happy to post it out, or a digital copy. So keep in touch with what we're doing. We have these Just People workshops which we've been offering. We created them in partnership with Together for the Common Good. And so these workshops are an opportunity to reflect in small groups over a day or 2 sessions if it's online with a small group of people and just really look into the Catholic social teaching very deeply around the criminal justice issues and think about whether the Lord might be calling you to some particular role in the criminal justice work. So again, there's some leaflets over there about those Just People workshops if you're interested. My colleague Marie is delivering those at the moment. Chloe mentioned the Prisons Families Helpline, which PACT operates. So today I brought a load of posters about the Prisons Family Helpline. One thing you could do is simply take one and put it up in your church porch or in your parish hall or both, or in some other neighbourhood centre, because there may be somebody passing who is in a situation where that is just what they need, where their family member is going to prison, has gone to prison, they don't know where they are, they don't know how to contact them, they don't know what to do with their stuff. The Prisons Family Helpline would be able to help. And lots of people, unless you tell them, they might not know about it. So please take a poster and put it somewhere useful. Now, we have a couple of things during the year where, so Operation Elf is our Christmas project, which is about supporting prisoners who are parents to give a gift to their child. So what we don't want to do is parachute in and be the person who helps the child. We support the parent in prison to give a gift to their child through Operation Elf. At one time we were collecting toys that we then supported prisoners to give to their child, but the last couple of years, because of COVID, we've done these book tokens or gift tokens, which actually have been a bit more practical in some ways.
And kids prefer them.
And some children, yes, so what you're giving the child, what the parent is giving the child then is an opportunity to go shopping for something they would like.
Can I just give a quick example of that? So in one of my prisons in South Yorkshire, one of the service users basically said, we've got storybook dads, which if you don't know is where you can, the prisoner can record themselves reading a book, and then that recording is given to the child so that they can listen to it. And he said, that's fantastic, but I'd actually like to real-time read to my child. So with the book token, we was able to buy 2 of the same books, and using the in-cell forms, he was able to read it to his child in time. So every night over a couple of weeks, he was able to read his child a bedtime story, and he said that was more powerful than anything else, and that was very much from just one donation, and it was fantastic. So what we've managed to do is contact a company who do give books out for free, so we've been able to duplicate all those books, and anyone that is interested in the South Yorkshire prisons be able to give those books out, post them out to the children, give them to the guys on the wings, and then they can read to the children in real time. So that has been a really nice piece of work.
Thank you, Chloe, thank you. So that illustrates really very well. One of the things we're thinking about this time is that maybe some parishes would partner with PAC services, in particular prison, so as to be able to support a project like that, where it's something that's happening in some prisons and not others. It's really useful if someone locally, a community locally, who can support PAC services in a kind of tailored way to work with them directly. So that's something we'll be able to facilitate from the office if you're with a parish community that might be interested in that, or got some sort of connection with a prison, or the prison is near you. Talk to us about that. And then Chloe mentioned giving time as a volunteer, so we have a volunteer department, we offer a considerable amount of training and support for volunteers, of course, because it's a tricky area, so people get a lot of support to be volunteers with us. As Chloe was saying, at the moment we're not sure what volunteers we might need, but we're hoping that when all this bidding process has worked through, that we will have some opportunities for volunteers. So bear that in mind and keep in touch. But we do have some national volunteer opportunities too. So the Prisoners Families Helpline that I mentioned, some of the staffing of that is by volunteers, and people can do that in their own home due to the wonders of technology. So if you know of someone, or if you yourself are interested in that, that's something we can help with, we can talk about. So there's a number of leaflets at the back there. Do take them. There's a little sign-up card, sign up to say that you're interested in staying in touch with us. But anyway, I'll be emailing people who've attended, who've registered, so I've got your email address. So anyone who didn't register, I'm not looking at anyone, give me your email address before you go if you'd like to receive the follow-up email, and I'll include links to the films that we saw in case you want to watch the whole film. I was just mentioning to someone earlier that Lewis, who does the poem there, we've got a great film of him with another former prisoner called Jamie. It's called Redemption Stories, and they're talking together about their experiences in prison and how their faith supported them. And it's a beautiful film, so I'll send you the link to that too. You might like to watch that. Right, have I covered everything? Chloe, is there anything else on the ways to help? Okay, so that's the time to choose. These are the things you can choose from to help people affected by the criminal justice system here where you are. Okay, and then when you get the email with all the follow-up ideas, you can think about a time to act, what you might do to take some action. Now, I appreciate some people here are already doing plenty of action, so sometimes it's about spreading the word. So please go and talk to people about PACT and about the Welcome Directory, about the opportunities to support people in these situations in our communities. Okay, I think that may be everything, unless there's any final questions. Okay, good. Well, we're going to be around for a few more minutes if people want to talk, but Joe, I think, are you going to lead us in some prayer?
Picking up on the point that Teresa mentioned about action, I've chosen the prayer which some of you may already know, which has been attributed to Archbishop St. Oscar Romero. So in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. This is what we are about. We plant the seeds that one day will grow. We water seeds already planted, knowing that they hold future promise. We lay foundations that need further development. We provide yeast that produces effects far beyond our capabilities. We cannot do everything, and there is a sense of liberation in realizing that. This enables us to do something and do it very well. It may be incomplete, a step along the way, an opportunity for the Lord's grace to enter and to rest. We may never see the end results, but it is the difference between the master builder and the worker. Amen.